How is it that some of us excel in one thing, say watercolor painting, after years of practice and dedication, while others are able to tackle any subject and any art medium so effortlessly? I've personally not found it very difficult to switch mediums and subjects over the course of my art journey, so I'm going to share what I think helps me most. And to do this, I have challenged myself to paint this reference photo with a medium that many find limiting and hard to work with. And as you can see, I'm testing this upgrade box today, so it's even more challenging for me because I'm going to use supplies that I'm not used to. So let's see how that goes. Hi, I'm Françoise. Welcome back to my channel. I do mostly watercolor and watercolor pencil videos here, but once in a while I like to try different things. My first advice for you is to be bold and experiment. And I know it sounds cliche, but I'm gonna show you that it's not, because that's what I'm doing right now. Upgrade contacted me to try out one of their boxes, and at the time I had been saying no to every brand for the past 9 months, I think, to focus on my regular mediums and favorite supplies. But I needed to step out of my comfort zone. I felt like it, so I said yes. And instead of picking the easiest choice for me, watercolor, I went with oil pastels, and I was excited to receive and open my box. Challenges help us build on top of what's already there, and I think they help us fast track our learning curve for anything. So if you're in that phase where you want to learn, you want to improve, you want to try out new things, I think an art subscription box is a great move, because every month you get to receive something new. You don't necessarily know what it's going to be, and they always add those little tools, those little things that you would have never tried if you went into an art store and bought the stuff yourself. And that's why with this coupon code here, you can get 30% off your first art subscription box with Upgrade, and you'll find the link to do so in the description of the video. I do have some experience with oil pastels, but I've only painted simple landscapes and subjects before, the kind where there's not a crazy amount of detail, except for maybe this portrait right here that I featured in another video. I know from trying that it's possible to paint some detail and realism with them, but it's by no means easy with something like oil pastels. I've also learned that I have a favorite paper for this medium, because not all of them work that great, and I know I need the oil pastels to feel creamy for my techniques to actually work. If they're dry, it's going to be very difficult to get anywhere great. So all this to say that I was a bit nervous when I found this oil painting paper I had never heard of before, and these Van Gogh oil pastels I never tried. This stick here caught my attention right away as an interesting tool for oil pastels, and that's where art subscription boxes will give you those cool ideas for your art. And you'll see how towards the end of the video, I leveraged this little tool here. Upgrade also included this permanent marker and some Comté à Paris soft pastels, which is really nice because I haven't tried those yet either. But as you know, that was a lot already, so I decided to stick to the oil pastels, the oil painting paper, and the toothpick shaped stick. Knowing your supplies helps greatly to become excellent at any medium, any subject. But with the issues I'm about to run into not knowing any of these, you will see that supplies do not determine whether you are successful with your art or not. Let's just say that it helps. First, notice how the paper has this cool woven texture on it. And I never saw that anywhere else than a canvas. But for oil pastels, I am not too confident that this will work. So in this case, the way to go is just get started and see. We have to try it out. One of my favorite ways to punch fear in the face to actually start is to swatch colors. It's easy and it lets you test your paper and your medium at the same time. Right away, I found out that the pastels are creamy, as I like them to be, and the outcome when I blended them looked decent, although some seem less opaque than others. After being bold and experiment, I think that a crucial thing to become a chameleon when it comes to creating art is to work on your observation skills. Observation is key for pretty much everything, especially when you're into realism like me. So for example, it helps me draw my subject accurately enough, that's the first thing, and it can seem difficult to you right now. But the good news is that aside from a portrait, you do not need to make a sketch perfect at all. The main thing I do is I center the subject on the sheet, and from there, draw one petal, position the next one, and so on. To do this, I allow myself to erase and start over if I feel like I need to, and that's why it's better not to press really hard with a pencil. Then I also do a lot of back and forth with my eyes between the photo and the sheet. And I constantly evaluate the proportion of this petal against that petal, the placement of this thing against that one. I made detailed drawing videos about that, so if you're curious, if you want to learn more, check out the dedicated playlist. Knowing the medium you'll work with can help a bit here too. For example, I don't want my sketch to be too dark generally, so I tend to use a netted eraser like this, but I also know that oil pastels in particular are opaque, so it's going to be easy to cover up any pencil line. While with watercolors, you'd want to be more careful. I also find that observation helps when it comes to picking colors. Usually I'll limit my palette and I'll use 3 to 5 colors as a lot of people advise to, but here I'm picking more since the set is pretty small to begin with. Understanding color mixing will come as you experiment, and proof this is not the most important thing to master in art is that you can produce equally stunning works of art in monochrome too. So color mixing and color picking are definitely things to work on over time. You can experiment like I'm doing here to find combinations that work for you, but observation is what will take you further and help you use those skills. Because with observation, you'll also be able to place whatever color you picked in the right spot and get it to the level of contrast you need for your art to look realistic rather than flat, and I'll touch on that later. I explain every step of this oil pastel painting on my Patreon, from the supplies that I use to how I do a base layer, how I blend the oil pastels, how I paint the details with them, how I add small touches at the end, everything. So feel free to join if you want to learn this in real time with my voiceover. There are mostly watercolor and watercolor pencil tutorials at this time on my Patreon and a few other art mediums, and I'll place a link in the description of the video if you're interested in checking this out. In my experience, there are techniques out there that all mediums and all subjects have in common if your goal is to paint realistically. That's why I think that the ones who are able to develop their observation skills and practice certain techniques to the point that they become comfortable with them will have no trouble switching subjects and mediums. Because the truth is that for realism, it's always the same. I think that the only thing that changes is the tools that you use, the medium and the way to use that medium, and also the way to apply this or that technique. So yes, knowing your medium also helps, just like knowing the supplies helps, but it is not what is most important. Again, I'm using supplies I am not familiar with, and a medium I know, but I haven't mastered for not working with it for that long. And I'm also tackling a challenging photo. What's helping me right now is that I know I need to block in my colors. I know I need a base layer, which I can build on top of later. That's something I would do with graphite, colored and watercolor pencils, gouache, watercolors, acrylics, oils, charcoal, basically everything. Another thing that applies is that it's a good idea to overlap different colors onto a main one, because I don't want this painting to look cartoony. I want to make it look realistic. And to do so, I know that it's better if there's a variety of colors showing all over the painting. The way that I'm blending this now pertains to this medium in particular, and that's where the learning curve happens, even after mastering the art of painting realistically, I guess. But then, making sure that this base is blended somehow is what I would do with any other medium, in the way that that medium requires it. Next thing that I always do is to layer once more, and that's where the first details can be added. And I know it from experience, and I'm able to transfer that knowledge and that skill to other mediums easily. For the flower, I proceeded in the same way. And I know that for oil pastels in particular, White is used differently than it is with pencils or watercolors, for instance. And I know also it's easy to contaminate one part with another, especially if it's white. So I've added a blending stump to get more precise, to get into the details more easily. And that's actually a tool that I've transferred over to my oil pastel process from drawing with graphite. It was just an idea I had one day. I don't know if other oil pastel artists do this, but you can see how you can transfer one thing from a medium to another one if you want. Contrast is also super important for realistic art. And observation is what helps me see on my reference where those dark and light areas are. The way that I deal with it is the idea that my main colors that I've picked will always be the midtones in my painting or drawing. And then I have to add a dark color, here it's going to be black, and a white color, here the white pastel, because adding those dark parts and amplifying the light ones with white is something that I always do in my art process, and that works great for realism. I was really curious about the toothpick tool earlier, and thanks to having it in the upgrade box, I'm discovering how cool it is to create fine highlights and actually make the base layer in the painting show through. That's pretty huge actually, a nice discovery about oil pastels. It also helps with texture, so that's definitely something that I'll keep in mind for my future oil pastel art. So remember, what matters to improve your art is to actually know what to focus on. And primarily, I'd say this is just to start an experiment, then develop your observation skills, and finally practice the techniques that pertain to your chosen art style to master them. And then you can figure out the supplies and the medium a lot easier, because that's not much left to learn about once you have these basics down. I managed to work with this paper better than I expected originally. And this is more than decent, I think, for such a complex topic and unknown supplies. Although I think I would have done better on my favorite paper. So thank you, Upgrade, for letting me try out these supplies. For sure I'll be using them all again. And I already have an idea for a graphite drawing on this interesting paper, even though it's for oils. So guys, let me know in the comments what your own art challenge is going to be next. And remember to check out the description of the video for your Upgrade discount and also Patreon links if you want to paint along with me. Otherwise, here's my oil pastel playlist for you to watch next. Thank you so much for sticking around, and see you next time.